In the silence of the early morning, a millionaire hears the sound of dishes being washed and decides to investigate. At 3 in the morning in Manhattan's Upper East Side, Alexander Hayes walked through the long corridors of his penthouse mansion. Insomnia had been his constant companion for years, ever since an unresolved past continued to haunt him. As a billionaire who controlled the largest real estate and technology empire on the East Coast, he was accustomed to anticipating global crises with flawless precision. But tonight, something strange disturbed the absolute silence of his home. The sound of dishes clinking against water, soft, domestic, yet completely out of place in the dead silence of the night. To Alexander, it sounded like a scream in the stillness. His brow furrowed. All staff should have been asleep since 10 o'clock. The rules in his house were strict, so who would dare break them? With slow but firm steps, he descended the marble staircase toward the kitchen. The dim light from above the sink illuminated a small figure with her back to him. A little girl, very small, standing on a wooden stool to reach the sink. Her tiny hands moved mechanically, washing plate after plate with movements too practiced for someone her age. Alexander stopped in the doorway, observing. The child's long hair was tied hastily, several strands stuck to her small neck, damp with sweat. She wore a nightgown that was too big, its hem touching the floor. Her small hands were red, the skin slightly wrinkled from being submerged too long in hot water. When Alexander stepped inside, the wooden floorboard creaked softly. The child jerked in surprise, turning quickly. A wine glass slipped from her hands, shattering on the marble floor with a deafening sound in the night's silence. The child's eyes widened in fear. She immediately climbed down from the stool, knelt on the floor, her trembling hands gathering the glass shards. Tears began streaming down her thin cheeks. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes. I'm sorry. Please don't tell Mum. I was just trying to help. Mum is sick. I just wanted to finish everything before she woke up. Please, sir, don't tell Mum." Her voice trembled, full of panic. Alexander stood frozen. He recognized this child, the daughter of Grace, his housekeeper who had worked for 5 years. The girl's name was Lily, 7 years old. He had seen her a few times, always quiet, always polite, always hiding behind her mother. "Stop, don't touch that glass," Alexander said in a low but firm voice. Lily froze, her hands still hovering over the glass shards. She looked up, her large eyes staring at Alexander with tremendous fear. Alexander crouched down, grabbed a small broom from the corner of the kitchen, and began sweeping the glass shards. Lily backed away, still trembling. Alexander noticed small details scattered around the kitchen. A pink school backpack with a small teddy bear keychain leaning against the wall. A coloring book open on a small table, full of flower drawings and misspelled words. Next to it, an old yellowed photograph showing a man in military uniform and a smiling woman. Alexander picked up the photo. His eyes narrowed. There was something familiar about the man's face in the photo, but he couldn't immediately recall it. "Who is this?" Alexander asked softly. Lily wiped her tears. "My Grandpa. Grandpa's been gone a long time. Mum says Grandpa was a hero." Alexander placed the photo back carefully. He looked at Lily, who was still trembling with fear. "You won't be punished. But now you need to sleep. It's too late for you. But these dishes, I'll take care of them. Go to bed." Lily hesitated, but seeing Alexander's firm gaze, she finally nodded slowly. With small steps, she grabbed her school bag and coloring book, then ran out of the kitchen. Alexander stood alone in the quiet kitchen. He stared at the pile of dishes still unwashed, his hands clenched into fists. There was something very wrong here. A 7-year-old child shouldn't be washing dishes in the middle of the night with hands injured from hot water. She shouldn't be so terrified just from breaking a glass. For the first time in years, Alexander didn't return to his bed. He walked to his office, turned on his computer, and began contacting his most trusted assistant, Marcus Thompson. A brief message. "I need a complete report on Grace and her daughter. Every detail. Send it this morning." Alexander sat in his large leather chair, staring at the family photo displayed on the wall. A photo of his mother who had passed away long ago, and a photo of his younger brother smiling in military uniform, his brother who never returned from the battlefield decades ago. That morning, When the sun was just beginning to light up the Manhattan skyline, Marcus Thompson arrived with a thick folder of documents. His face was serious. "Mr. Hayes, here's the report." Alexander opened the folder. Page after page, he read carefully. The deeper he read, the harder his jaw clenched. Grace suffered from advanced stage lupus. The aggressive autoimmune disease had deformed her hands, drained her strength, and caused her to lose her second job at a restaurant. With monthly medication costs reaching $900, an amount impossible to reach with her salary as a housekeeper, and the insurance denying coverage for the specialized drugs she needed, calling them experimental treatment, Grace continued working just to maintain basic insurance, and Lily, without fully understanding the gravity of the situation, tried to take care of the house for Mommy, repeating gestures she saw, believing she was saving her mother from punishment. Alexander closed the folder hard. His chest felt tight. He looked at Marcus. "Is there more?" Marcus nodded, pulling out an old photo from a separate folder. "This is the most surprising part, sir. Grace's father, Lily's grandfather, was Captain Robert Mitchell. He served in the same company as your brother, David Hayes." Alexander grabbed the photo with trembling hands. The black and white photograph showed a group of young soldiers covered in mud, standing in the middle of a forest. Among them, his brother David smiled broadly, his arm around the shoulder of an older man. That man was Captain Robert Mitchell. Alexander remembered. He remembered the letters Captain Robert sent to his mother after David's passing. Letters full of warmth, telling of David's courage, comforting his mother in the darkest times. Letters that became the only consolation for his shattered family. Captain Robert was the only link of humanity in a time that destroyed his family. And now, his granddaughter was washing dishes with injured hands in the middle of the night, while his daughter was dying from a disease that should be treatable. Alexander stood, walking to the large window overlooking his vast garden. The morning sun illuminated the lush trees, but in his chest, a storm raged. "Marcus, arrange a meeting with the best lupus specialist in New York. No, in the country. I want Grace to receive complete treatment, immediately." Marcus took notes quickly. "Yes, sir. When will you inform Grace?" "Today." That afternoon, Alexander called Grace to his office. The woman entered with slow steps, her face pale, her swollen hands hidden behind long sleeves. She bowed respectfully. "Is there something I can help you with, Mr. Hayes?" Alexander pointed to the chair in front of him. "Sit down." Grace hesitated, but finally sat on the edge of the chair, her back straight, her eyes downcast. "I know about your condition," Alexander said, getting straight to the point. "Advanced stage lupus. I've arranged complete treatment for you at Mount Sinai Hospital with the best specialist. All costs covered." Grace raised her head quickly, her eyes widening. But it wasn't gratitude that Alexander saw there. It was something else, something that surprised him. "Thank you for your kindness, sir," Grace said in a soft but firm voice, "but I can't accept." Alexander fell silent. This was the first time someone had refused his help. "Why, I don't want charity, sir. I don't want pity. I just want to work. I want to earn what I need through my own efforts." Grace's voice trembled, but her eyes looked at Alexander with a gaze full of dignity. Tears began flowing down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. Alexander fell silent. For the first time in his life, someone had set boundaries for him. Someone had refused the way he offered salvation, and there he understood. The most powerful help is help that respects the autonomy of those who receive it. "All right," Alexander said softly. "Sirs, then I have another offer." Alexander opened his desk drawer and pulled out a dark blue folder. He placed it on the desk in front of Grace. "My mother, the late Catherine Hayes, founded a charitable foundation 30 years ago. The foundation focused on helping military veteran families in need. After my mother passed away, the foundation was neglected due to internal family issues. I want to reactivate it." Grace looked at the folder with confusion. "What does this have to do with me, sir?" "Your father, Captain Robert Mitchell, once served with my brother David. After David's passing, your father sent letters to my mother, letters that comforted us in the darkest times. Without him, Perhaps my mother would never have been able to rise from her grief. Grace fell silent. Her tears flowed harder. She never knew about this. I have a moral debt to your father, Alexander continued, and I want to repay it, not with charity, but by giving you decent work. I want you to become the operational director of this foundation, a proper salary, full health insurance, and access to the best medical care as part of your job benefits. This isn't pity, this is work, and you deserve it. Grace covered her mouth with her hand, her body trembling. She couldn't say anything. Alexander gave her time to process all this information. But what, Alexander said softly. To activate this foundation, I need approval from another family member who has rights to the foundation's funds, and I haven't spoken to that person in years. Grace raised her head. Who, sir? My cousin, Elizabeth Morgan. We separated after my mother's passing due to a dispute about the inheritance. We haven't spoken since then. Alexander stood, walking to the window. His shadow was long on the marble floor. But for Lily, for you, I'll do it. Grace stood, bowing deeply. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. I don't know what to say. Don't thank me yet. There's still a lot I need to handle. However, before Alexander could begin his steps, a new problem emerged. 2 days later, in his company's board meeting, one of the most influential board members, Richard Blackwell, raised a surprising issue. Mr. Hayes, we've heard that you're planning to divert company funds for a personal philanthropic project. Is this true? The large meeting room fell silent. All eyes turned to Alexander, who sat at the end of the long table. I'm reactivating the foundation established by my mother. This isn't a personal project. This is a family legacy. Richard smiled thinly, but his eyes were cold. With all due respect, sir, some of us are concerned that your recent decisions are no longer based on business logic, but on emotion. This company has responsibilities to shareholders. Philanthropic decisions without clear financial return could endanger investor confidence. Alexander looked at Richard sharply. Are you saying that helping veteran families is wasteful? I'm saying that as CEO, you must prioritize the company's interests. If you want to do philanthropy, do it with your personal money, not with company resources. Several board members nodded in agreement. Alexander could feel the pressure building. Richard wasn't just an ordinary board member. He had significant shares and great influence among other investors. I'll consider your input, Alexander said coldly. Meeting adjourned. After everyone left, Marcus approached Alexander with a worried face. Sir, Richard is gathering support to hold a vote to replace you as CEO. He's spreading rumors that you're emotionally unstable. Alexander clenched his fists. How many are supporting him? Not certain yet, but enough to make that vote dangerous. Alexander stared out the window of the skyscraper, overlooking the bustling New York City, the city where he built his business empire, the city that now threatened to take everything from him. We continue according to plan. Arrange a meeting with Elizabeth. I'll talk to her. But before Alexander could arrange a meeting with Elizabeth, another disaster struck. One morning, when he had just arrived at the office, Marcus ran in with a panicked face. Mr. Hayes, there's a big problem. What? Child Protective Services came to your house this morning. They took Lily. Alexander froze. Now, what do you mean they took Lily? There was an anonymous report about child labor. They said Lily was being forced to work at your house. CPS took Lily for temporary protection until the investigation is complete. Alexander felt his blood boiling. He immediately grabbed his car keys and ran out. Marcus followed behind him. At the CPS office, Alexander found Grace sitting in the waiting chair, sobbing. When she saw Alexander, she immediately stood up. Mr. Hayes, they took Lily. They said I'm not fit to be a mother. They said I let my child work. Alexander held Grace's shoulders gently. Calm down. I'll handle this. He entered the office of the department head, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Patricia Sullivan. The woman looked at Alexander with a professional but firm gaze. Mr. Hayes, we received a report that there's an underage child being employed at your house. We have an obligation to protect that child. Lily isn't employed. She lives there with her mother who works for me. What you saw was a misunderstanding. We found the child washing dishes in the middle of the night, sir. Her hands were injured. This isn't a misunderstanding. Alexander took a deep breath. I understand your concern, but the situation is more complex than you think. The child's mother is sick. Lily was trying to help without anyone's knowledge. I've already taken steps to ensure this doesn't happen again. What steps? I'm arranging full medical care for her mother and psychological support for Lily. I'm also activating a foundation to help families like them. Mrs. Sullivan looked at him skeptically. With all due respect, sir, we can't just trust promises. We need concrete evidence that this child will be safe. How long will you hold Lily? Until we're sure that her home environment is safe. Could be a few days, could be a few weeks. Alexander felt tremendous frustration. For the first time, his money and power couldn't solve a problem quickly. He was facing bureaucracy, a system that didn't care who he was. I want to see Lily. Mrs. Sullivan hesitated, but finally nodded. 5 minutes. Lily sat in a small room with old toys scattered on the floor. When Alexander entered, the child immediately ran toward him, hugging his legs. Mr. Hayes, I want to go home. I want to see Mom. Alexander crouched down, looking into Lily's tear-filled eyes. You will go home, Lily. I promise. But now you have to be strong. You have to trust me. Why did they take me? I didn't do anything wrong. I know. This isn't your fault. But these people want to make sure you're safe. They don't understand our situation, but I'll fix it. Lily hugged Alexander tightly. Don't take long, sir. Mom must be sad. It won't be long. I promise. When Alexander left the CPS office, he immediately called his team of lawyers. He also contacted the best child psychologist in New York and independent social workers who could provide testimony. Within 48 hours, he gathered all the necessary documents, including a medical certificate about Grace's condition, a complete treatment plan, and the foundation proposal he had prepared. But most importantly, he filed a petition to become Lily's temporary guardian until Grace was healthy enough to care for her again. This was a risky move, but he had no other choice. 3 days later, after a brief court hearing, the judge granted Alexander's petition. Lily could return, but under strict supervision. Alexander had to report the child's condition every week to CPS. When Lily finally returned home, Grace hugged her tightly, crying endlessly. Alexander stood in the distance, watching. Something had changed within him. He realized that not all problems could be solved with money or power. Some problems required patience, strategy, and most importantly, presence. But that happiness didn't last long. 2 days after Lily returned, Grace disappeared. That morning, when Alexander came down for breakfast, he found Lily sitting alone at the dining table, staring blankly at the plate in front of her. There was no Grace preparing breakfast as usual. "Where's your mother?" Alexander asked. Lily shook her head slowly, tears beginning to flow. "I don't know, sir. I woke up and Mom was already gone. All her clothes are still here, but Mom isn't." Alexander immediately called Marcus. "Find Grace. Now use every resource we have." For 3 days, Alexander and his team searched for Grace throughout New York City. They checked hospitals, clinics, even shelters. No trace. Lily became increasingly withdrawn, barely eating, just sitting in her room hugging her old teddy bear. Alexander tried to comfort her, but he himself didn't know what to say. How could he promise something he wasn't sure of? In the midst of searching for Grace, Alexander also had to face another problem he had long postponed. He had to meet with Elizabeth Morgan, his cousin he hadn't spoken to in 15 years. The meeting was arranged at an upscale cafe in the West Village. When Alexander arrived, Elizabeth was already sitting at a corner table, wearing an elegant business suit, her hair neatly tied. Her face was still the same as Alexander remembered, but there were fine lines around her eyes, showing that time had passed. "Alexander," Elizabeth greeted coldly. "Elizabeth," Alexander replied, sitting across from her. An awkward silence enveloped them. The waiter came to take their order, but they both only ordered coffee. "You contacted me after 15 years. There must be something very important," Elizabeth finally said. "Mother's foundation. I want to reactivate it." Elizabeth laughed bitterly. "The foundation you ignored for years. The foundation you let die after Aunt Catherine passed away." I know I was wrong. I was too focused on business, too drowned in grief. But now I want to fix it. Why now? Why do you suddenly care? Alexander took a deep breath. Because I met someone who reminded me of what Mother always taught, that wealth without purpose is just empty numbers, that we have a responsibility to those who once sacrificed for us. Elizabeth looked at him sharply. Who is this person? The granddaughter of Captain Robert Mitchell, the man who sent letters to Mother after David's passing. Elizabeth fell silent. She remembered those letters. She remembered how Aunt Catherine read them repeatedly, how those letters became the only comfort in the darkest times. His granddaughter, Elizabeth asked softly, a 7-year-old girl. Her mother is seriously ill. They're living in hardship. I want to help them. But not just them. I want to help all forgotten veteran families, just as Mother always wanted. Elizabeth stared at her still steaming coffee. You know why I was angry with you back then? Because of the inheritance. Not just that. Because you abandoned everything Aunt Catherine fought for. You only focused on money, on power. You forgot the values she instilled. I felt you betrayed her memory. Alexander looked down. You're right. I betrayed her. And I'm sorry. But now I want to fix it. I need your help, Elizabeth. I can't do this alone. Elizabeth was silent for a long time. Finally, she let out a long sigh. What do you need from me? Your signature to unblock the foundation funds, and if you're willing, join me as a board member. Elizabeth looked at Alexander with an unreadable gaze. I'll sign the documents, but I want to see real proof that you're serious. Not just empty promises. You'll see it, I promise. 2 days after the meeting with Elizabeth, Marcus finally found Grace. She was found in a modest boarding house in Queens, lying weak on a small, hard bed. Her condition had drastically worsened. Her lupus had severely flared up, compounded by severe depression that made her unwilling to eat or drink. Alexander immediately took her to the hospital. The doctor said Grace was experiencing a lupus flare triggered by extreme emotional stress. She needed intensive care immediately. When Grace finally regained consciousness, the first thing she asked about was Lily. Where's Lily? Is she okay? She's fine. She's waiting for you, Alexander answered. Tears flowed down Grace's cheeks. I'm sorry, sir. I wasn't strong enough. I felt like I was just a burden. I thought Lily would be better off without me. Don't ever think like that again. Lily needs you. She doesn't need a perfect mother. She needs a mother who's there. Grace sobbed. Alexander sat in the chair beside the bed, letting the woman release all the burden she had been holding. A few days later, when Grace's condition was stable enough, Alexander arranged a meeting between Grace and Lily at the hospital. When Lily entered the room and saw her mother, she immediately ran and hugged her tightly. Mom, don't leave again. Don't leave Lily. Grace hugged her daughter tightly, crying silently. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry. Mom promises not to leave again. Alexander stood in the corner of the room, observing. Something had changed within him. He learned that not all pain could be solved with plans and efficiency. Some pain just needed to be seen, acknowledged, and accepted. After Grace was discharged from the hospital, Alexander invited her to his office. This time Elizabeth was also present. Grace entered with hesitant steps, seeing the two people sitting in the luxurious room. Grace, this is my cousin, Elizabeth Morgan. She's a board member of the foundation we're going to reactivate, Alexander said. Elizabeth smiled warmly, extending her hand. Grace shook it nervously. Grace, I've heard a lot about you and your father. Captain Robert, he was an extraordinary hero, Elizabeth said. Grace looked down. Thank you, Ma'am. Alexander opened a folder on his desk. The foundation funds have been unlocked. Elizabeth has signed all the necessary documents. Now, I want to officially offer you the position of operational director. Grace raised her head quickly. Sir, I don't know if I'm capable. You are capable, Alexander interrupted. You don't need to accept this out of pity. Accept this because you deserve it. You're the daughter of a hero, and you're raising an extraordinary child. You have strength that money can't buy, and this foundation needs that strength. Elizabeth nodded. I agree with Alexander. We're not looking for someone perfect. We're looking for someone who understands struggle, who understands pain. and who has the heart to help others experiencing the same thing. Grace looked at the two people in front of her. Slowly, she nodded. I accept, but I need time to learn. You'll have all the time you need, Alexander said, and you'll have a team supporting you. The following weeks were a period of intense transition. Alexander arranged complete medical care for Grace with the best lupus specialist in New York. Medications that were previously unaffordable were now available as part of her job benefits. Grace's condition slowly improved. For Lily, Alexander arranged psychological support with an experienced child psychologist. He also spoke with Lily's school principal, explaining the family situation and requesting understanding and additional support. The school provided a free tutoring program and regular counseling. Alexander also gave Lily something more valuable than all of that, the childhood she should have had. He filled Lily's room with books, toys, and art supplies. He arranged for Lily to take the ballet classes she had always wanted but could never afford. Slowly, the smile returned to Lily's face, a genuine smile, not a smile hiding pain. However, while Grace and Lily's lives began to improve, Alexander still had to face the threat from Richard Blackwell and the board of directors. Rumors about his emotional instability continued to spread. Some investors began questioning his leadership. One night, Marcus came to Alexander's house with a serious face. "Sir, Richard has gathered enough support. They're going to hold a vote next week to replace you as CEO. Alexander looked out the window toward New York City, twinkling in the night. The city he built. The city that might now take everything from him. "Let them vote," Alexander said calmly. "I've made my decision. Whatever the outcome, I won't regret it." The day of the vote arrived. The boardroom was packed. All board members were present, including several major shareholders who usually never attended routine meetings. Richard Blackwell sat confidently, a thin smile on his face. Alexander entered calmly, carrying a thick folder. He sat in his chair, looking at everyone in the room. "Before we start the vote," Alexander said, "I want to present something." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Hayes, this isn't the time for presentations. We're here to decide whether I'm fit to lead this company," Alexander interrupted. "And I think before you decide, you deserve to know what I've actually been doing." He opened his laptop and the projector lit up, displaying the first slide. Title: The Catherine Hayes Foundation, Social Investment with Long-Term Returns. For the next 30 minutes, Alexander presented the complete foundation plan. He showed data about how many veteran families lived below the poverty line, how many children dropped out of school because their parents couldn't afford education costs, and how many veterans didn't have access to proper health care. Then he showed projections of the foundation's social impact. How many families would be helped? How many children could return to school? How many people could receive health care? He also showed how this program could improve the company's image, attract investors who cared about corporate social responsibility, and open opportunities for cooperation with the government. "This isn't just about philanthropy," Alexander said. "This is about building a sustainable ecosystem. This is about repaying our debt to those who sacrificed for this country. And yes, this is also about building a legacy more meaningful than just numbers on financial reports." The room fell silent. Several board members looked impressed. Even Richard looked slightly uncomfortable. But Alexander wasn't finished. He displayed the final slide, a photo of Lily smiling, holding an award certificate from her school. Next to it, a photo of Grace looking much healthier, standing in front of the newly opened foundation office. This is Lily and her mother, Grace, the granddaughter and daughter of Captain Robert Mitchell, the man who sent comforting letters to my mother after my brother's passing. Without him, perhaps my family would never have been able to rise from grief. This is how I repay that debt. Not with money, but by giving them the opportunity to live with dignity. He closed his laptop and looked at everyone in the room. If you think this is a sign of emotional instability, then you're wrong. This is a sign that I finally understand what true leadership means. Not just about profit, but about impact. Not just about power, but about responsibility. And if you disagree with this vision, then please vote to replace me. I won't fight it." Silence enveloped the room. Then one of the senior board members, Mr. Harrison, who had been silent, raised his hand. "I want to ask Mr. Blackwell out," he said. "You were the first to raise the issue about Mr. Hayes's emotional instability. You were also the most vocal in opposing this foundation program. May I know, do you have a personal interest in this?" Richard looked surprised. "What do you mean?" Mr. Harrison pulled out a document from his bag. "I did a little research. It turns out your consulting firm just submitted a proposal to manage our company's CSR program. A program that would be disrupted if Mr. Hayes's foundation proceeds. Is this true?" Richard's face turned red. All eyes turned to him. "That's a separate business." "But it's a conflict of interest," Mr. Harrison interrupted. "You're opposing Mr. Hayes's program not because it's bad for the company, but because it would hurt your personal business." The atmosphere in the room changed drastically. Several board members began whispering. Richard tried to defend himself, but the more he spoke, the clearer his conflict of interest became. Finally, Mr. Harrison stood. "I propose postponing this vote. I think we need to reevaluate this situation with more complete information, and I personally support Mr. Hayes's foundation program. This is the right thing to do." One by one, other board members nodded in agreement. The vote was postponed. Richard left the room with a flushed face. After the meeting ended, Mr. Harrison approached Alexander. "Good presentation, Alexander. Your mother would be proud." Alexander smiled slightly. "Thank you, sir. But remember, there will still be those who oppose you. Make sure this program succeeds. Show them you're right." "I will." Years passed. The Catherine Hayes Foundation officially launched with Grace as operational director and Elizabeth as board chair. They began identifying veteran families in need, providing healthcare access, education scholarships, and job training programs. Alexander didn't do all this with big publicity. No press conferences, no media coverage, just quiet work focused on real impact. Lily grew into a cheerful and intelligent child. She was active at school, took the ballet classes she always dreamed of, and most importantly, she became a child again. No more nights washing dishes with injured hands. No more fear of losing her mother. Grace also underwent an extraordinary transformation. With proper medical care, her lupus condition was well controlled. She found new purpose in her life, helping other families experiencing similar struggles. She no longer felt like a burden, but became a bearer of hope. Years later, Lily, now 18 years old, stood at the podium as valedictorian at her high school graduation. She wore a blue gown, her long hair flowing neatly, her eyes shining with confidence. Alexander and Grace sat among the audience, side by side. Grace held Alexander's hand tightly, her tears already flowing before Lily even began speaking. "Good afternoon, teachers, parents, and fellow graduates," Lily began with a clear, firm voice. "I stand here today not because of luck. I stand here because of a series of small acts of kindness that changed my life." She paused, looking toward Grace and Alexander. "I remember when I was 7 years old, washing dishes in the middle of the night with injured hands, thinking that was how I would save my mother. I didn't know I didn't need to save anyone. What I needed was someone who would stop and listen to the sound of dishes being washed at 3 in the morning. Someone who saw a frightened little girl and decided to act." Tears began flowing down Lily's cheeks, but she kept smiling. "My grandmother, whom I never knew, wrote letters to comfort a mother who lost her son. My mother, who never gave up despite severe illness, and a man who decided to stop, listen to the sound of a glass on marble at 3 in the morning, and extend his hand." Lily looked directly at Alexander. "Mr. Hayes taught me that true change begins when someone decides to stop, look, and act, not with money, although that helps, but with presence, by seeing someone not as a charity project, but as a valuable human being." The room filled with applause. Lily wiped her tears and continued. "Today I'm going to college to study social work. I want to be like my mother, like Mr. Hayes, like Ms. Elizabeth. I want to be someone who stops, looks, and extends a hand to those in need. Because that's the true legacy. Not money, not power, but the lives we change with our presence." Thunderous applause erupted. Everyone stood. Grace sobbed, and Alexander, for the first time in years, felt tears flowing down his cheeks. After the ceremony ended, Lily ran toward them, hugging Grace and Alexander together. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." Alexander held Lily's shoulder gently, just as he had done years ago when the child was still small and frightened. "You don't need to thank me. You taught me about true courage." That night, when Alexander returned to his penthouse mansion on the Upper East Side, he no longer felt lonely. He no longer stayed awake from tormenting insomnia. He slept soundly, with a peaceful feeling he had never experienced before, because finally he understood. His debt to the past had been repaid, not with money, but with presence. And his most valuable legacy wasn't in business contracts, but in the lives he helped rebuild with his decision to stop, listen, and act.